Hello and welcome.
Hello, hello.
Thank you all for being here. My name is Danielle Amato. I'm the Director of New Plays and Dramaturgy here at the Globe. And it is my great pleasure to have with me here tonight Director Arya Shahi.
Thank you.
Let me give you a little taste of Arya's credits.
Oh boy, here we go.
At the Old Globe, The Old Man and the Old Moon, and The Tale of Despero. Both in both, we'll talk a little bit about Pigpen and what that role, because you're credited as writer, director, actor. So we'll talk a little bit about that process and that company work that you do there. On Broadway, Water for Elephants composer. And then The Old Man and the Old Moon and Tale of Despero, many places. The Hunter and the Bear at Writers Theater. And then albums with the group, Bremen, The Way I'm Running, Whole Sun. And novels, which we will talk about as well, An Impossible Thing to Say from HarperCollins. And the forthcoming sequel. So, thank you so much for being here. Yay!
Thanks for having me. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming out.
So let's talk a little bit about the shows that people might have seen. How many folks here saw The Old Man and the Old Moon? Woo! Amazing.
Very cool.
How many saw Tale of Despero? Woo! I'd love to hear about the process of the company-created work that you have done in the past and how that is similar to or different from directing a show as a solo director.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so Pigpen and I have been together now for longer than I care to admit, which is 17 years, which is really crazy because we all met as freshmen in college. And as some of you may or may not remember, we are all in those shows, the seven of us. We play lots of music in them, and we play lots of characters in them, and it's kind of like the most enhanced version of junkyard theater that you could probably think of, because we were college students and we had junk in our dorm rooms, and we started, writing stories and writing songs. It was about a year into us knowing each other, actually, that we all serendipitously recognized that we were all in high school bands. So music wasn't a part of our trajectory at all for the first year. And we're like, wait, you play music? Oh, you play? Okay, cool. Let's try to see if we can write songs together. And then the music got, I think, maybe bigger than our theater now. I don't know which one people know us for more, because we started writing these songs for the shows, and we wrote four kind of folk musicals while we were in college. We took them to New York City, and then we released an album in 2012 and another album in 2015, and we toured the world as a band playing those albums. And so the group is really unique. It's a really cool thing. In retrospect, I can't believe how well it all went. It's a hard thing to have same seven people for all 17 years. And we all grew together. We've done weddings and funerals together. It's become a family. It's become a real family. And making work in that way is incredibly rare in the United States of America, for sure. It is a very kind of traditional ensemble that we just happened to find. One job led to the next, and we strung jobs along until, I guess the crowning achievement for in this country is Broadway. And so we're all going to make our Broadway debuts next month. As composers for Water for Elephants, and which feels like a very strange thing because that's only a small portion of what we do. We generally don't write music for other people to sing, so that was a new adventure. We did a little bit of that in The Tale of Despero. I'm sure if you guys saw that, there were 4 other actors in the show with us, so that was the first time we're like, oh, let's write music for other people's voices. And then, that's my background. That's my theatrical kind of resume. And then, go for it. No, and then while that's all happening in the background of my attention and my brain, I hear about this playwright named Sanaz Toossi, who's Iranian American, and I'm Iranian American, and she's written this play called English that everyone is really digging in New York. I'm like, that's great. We have an Iranian American doing something cool. That's rare and exciting. And then it wins the Pulitzer, and I broke down in tears. Just like I was in Water for Elephants rehearsal. I don't know Sanaz. I'd never met her. Didn't know anything about the play. But it's really a strange feeling that I've been wrestling with now for about 5 years professionally. I grew up in an Iranian-American family. I speak Farsi. It's just a part of my brain and a part of my life that I've never gotten to explore in the American theater. And I think the part of me that was so touched when it won the Pulitzer is because I didn't think it would ever really happen. Like, I know that we have, great black playwrights. I know we have great Latinx playwrights. But, like, it just, like, Iranians, it felt so outside. Really, I mean, I'm just being honest. Like, it just, like, I hate being political, but narrative is really important, right? Narrative is why we do this. And as a kid, I never thought that the Iranian narrative would be one that anyone cared about unless you were from there. So Sanaz wins the Pulitzer, and I was like, oh, wow, I should probably read that play. I was like, somebody should send me that play. And of all the people in the world that sent it to me, it was Barry. Barry, he was like, you should probably read this, and also, how would you like to direct it? And that was a really cool moment.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your identity as an artist.
Sure.
I think before we start talking about the play, because I really want to go in depth on the
play.
Of course. But I think it's hard for people to conceptualize group work like Pigpen does without being like, well, one of you must be the songwriter and one of you must be the director. Really, really the director. You know what I mean?
I know the really questions, like who really does the work.
But I'm interested in how you think of yourself with wearing so many different hats: directing, performing, composing, lyricist, and novelist. Like, is there a hat that you feel most comfortable in? Do you feel most comfortable when you are doing all the things at once? Do you like to step from one role to the next?
Yeah, that's a great question, Danielle. I'm still figuring all that out. Because I guess for the purposes of industry and, functioning machinery and institutions, you need to kind of play a certain role, and I'm more than happy to do that. But I'm happiest when I'm doing all of it together. And because I learned how to do all of it together. I think that's really the difference, is that like I didn't study percussion. The only thing I've studied professionally is acting, right? Like my degree is in acting. But I've been playing music and writing poems and raps and stories since I was a kid. And my dad is an entrepreneur, so like producing comes very, very naturally to me. So like it all is the same part. And I think for my entire training process, people were like, mentor figures were trying to steer me. They're like, listen, you've got this thing, you should do this thing. And I always felt like, well, that would be just less than what I'm doing already. Like, why would I just go do that one thing? And the real reason is practicality. It's like health insurance. It's like that stuff. Like there are easier routes. There are easier paths to walk. And as I get older, I'm 36, and
ancient. Oh.
Guys, come on.
Over
It's tough for me, okay? I'm still coming to terms with that. No, let me tell you why. It's actually important. Because I know I have a lot of life ahead of me, and I know I still have a lot of time, but being in Pigpen was so weird because we were a boy band. We were like a boy band. We were like the boy band of the theater world. And all of a sudden, I'm like, well, I don't look like a boy anymore. I don't know what my identity is.
No longer a wunderkind.
Really, the New Yorker called us child geniuses, which is like, don't do that. Like that. Come on, man.
Never ends well.
It's just like you're putting a date like of expiration, and it's 36 is when it is. Okay, so this is the New Yorker's fault. So I think all the roles blend in my mind, but I am really excited that we've all gotten to the point where I think most of the country knows what Pigpen is and what it does. So when we choose to come together and be that, it's very special. And we try to kind of go off and do our own things when it makes sense to.
Right. Well, speaking of jobs that won't get you health insurance, maybe you can talk a little about your novel. I'm curious I'd love to hear, like, what was the impulse that led you to look at a different form from theater to writing for prose? And then could you tell us a little bit about what it's like, what the style is, what the content is?
Yeah, so when Donald Trump was elected, for me, this was a moment in my life because he was saying a lot of things that just didn't make sense to me, just like culturally. And I know. It's not the politics of it. I grew up in Arizona. I know a lot of Republicans. It's not the politics of it. It was this guy saying things that I'm like, how is this working? How is this working? And I called my I called my friends who were a bunch of lawyers, and I was like, I'm quitting Pigpen and I'm going to law school. And they were like, don't do that. Like law, that's not you are you're romanticizing what it means to be a lawyer. And I was like, no, I really want to do that. And at the same time, I wrote a rap that I posted online. And my literary agent saw that rap. And she called me. She's like, you should write poetry. and so it was between becoming a lawyer and writing more poetry. And I chose poetry. And the novel that I wrote is called An Impossible Thing to Say. It's a novel written entirely in verse. And it's about a boy very much like me who grew up in Tucson, Arizona in 2001. And that's the year that his So I grew up. He grew up in Tucson, Arizona, in the year 2001, and his grandparents emigrate from Iran to live in Arizona. So the first time he meets them is on the 4th of July, 2001, and then a couple months later, 9/11 happens, and it kind of changes his relationship with his own culture. Slowly at first, because I think in retrospect, we'd like to think that everything happened very quickly, but I think having to revisit that time in my life and be like, what was that all like, was really, really fascinating. I'm really glad that I wrote it in verse because I love poetry and I love ambiguity and the gaps between, the gaps between are really important to me in my life. So I wrote this story about him falling in love with a girl in his class post 9/11 who was really into Shakespeare. And so he auditions for Midsummer Night's Dream to be closer to her. And he gets cast as Bottom, which has happened to me many times in my life. I don't know why I give Bottom energy. And so it was actually, it's this exploration of how does he communicate with his grandparents who don't speak English. So he's trying to learn Farsi, and he's really struggling with his Farsi the whole book. And then this girl that he's in love with is really into Shakespeare, so he gets into Shakespeare, and then his best friend is really into rap. So he starts getting into rap, and the book culminates in this crazy passages I never thought I could write. So I'm really, really glad that my literary agent was pushing me for 7 years to finish this thing. Because so it's like this big rap verse Shakespeare mashup of this Iranian kid's life. Yeah, that's that. It was just released. It was just nominated for best book of the year by California booksellers. It's doing really well. I'm very grateful once again. Very, very grateful. It's made a lot of those fun lists at the end of the year, and I have to write another one, and I don't know how to do that. So we'll figure that out.
Ask me. I would love to. It sounds like there is some overlap in terms of content between English and your novel in terms of language learning and in terms of how our identity shifts in different languages and in terms of the role that the thing that English symbolizes for all of these characters. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about language in this play. How about for the next 2.5 hours?
Legit, language is it's my favorite thing. I think language it's the building blocks of our reality is language, right? We're assigning words to things that we are trying to express and things we're trying to like trash can, sky. These are it's very fascinating for somebody who is bilingual, who speaks multiple languages, to know that there's a tone and a texture and a tenor to the words that we're using that actually do shape our personalities, our senses of humor, the things that we take seriously versus the things that we kind of dismiss. So in my book, it's all about a kid trying to break through this hyper-poetic language of Farsi, and he has a much more literal approach because he's an English speaker. And I chipped away at that in terms of there's one of my favorite lines in the book is how he talks about when he finally starts learning how to rap. He says that rapping feels like speaking Farsi in English because that's how I feel when I rap. When I rap, I feel like I'm speaking Farsi. I just happen to be speaking English. Farsi is very poetic. There's a lot of meter to Farsi. So, I started thinking a lot for many years about the overlap between these two very specific languages that Sanaz also happened to be writing about at the same time. And I do believe that in the kismet of that. I think our parents' generation came here and assimilated, and their kids have had enough time to stew in it, right? Like our parents don't have the luxury of sitting around writing poetry. Our parents had to build lives. And it's an immense responsibility to be second generation because you don't want to let them down. And I chose to go into the arts. So already, strong start. Strong start.
Uh-oh, do you have siblings?
I do.
Okay, good.
Don't worry. He's a venture capitalist, so we're doing okay. One out of two. No, but I really do believe in that synergy between what Sanaz was exploring and what I was exploring, because she really is writing the story that I was writing in reverse, right? She's writing the Iranians in Iran struggling to learn English. So when I read it, I mean, there are things that she literally did in this play where I was like, I just did that. It's so fascinating, right? From an artist to artist perspective, it's like, oh, there's something going on, right? Like, and then the day that my book came out in New York, I had actually met Sanaz for the first time, finally, the night before that, and she's great. And the next day, when my book release was happening, Narges Mohammadi won the Nobel Peace Prize, who's the woman who's right now being held in Evin prison, which is the prison where they killed my grandfather's brother. So, like, it's very close to home. And I just, like, realized, like, oh, my career means nothing. Like, something much bigger is happening than my career right now. Like, for some reason, we've all been waiting for it, but it feels like Americans are ready to listen to a different version of that narrative. And it's really, I'm just saying that because it's like I'm feeling it. Every single day of my life, I'm feeling it. Like, nobody cared that I was Iranian 5 years ago. They cared that I was in Pigmen. And now they care that I'm Iranian. And that's great too, because I am both those things, right? But it's really fascinating because we've been learning how to code and position ourselves for like 20, 30 years now, and trying to like minimalize that. And it's because of the way that Iran is painted, right? It's because of the way that the regime, it's the worst regime in the world. I mean, it's a completely horrendous government. So rightfully so, it's painted as in a really, really, really terrible light. But the people are not that. And it's really difficult for those of us who know that and have no room for that in the conversation. It's really hard. So I think that's the thing that's happening right now. You know, Sanaz winning the Pulitzer, Narges winning the Nobel Peace Prize, me directing at the Old Globe. I think these things are all the same.
Synergy for sure.
Definitely. Yeah.
I'd love to know how many folks in the room here tonight speak a second language, are bilingual. So some portion of it. Okay, great.
That's
I'm
awesome.
just curious about that. I'd love to know some of the joys and the challenges of this play as a director. Some of the things that make it really difficult, or some of the things that make it really powerful on stage.
The writing is very, very good. The writing is undeniably good, which is actually kind of makes my job harder, because generally plays have like good parts and bad parts, and you like lean into the good parts. But when the entire script is this good, you are constantly being challenged to rise to the occasion of it in every single scene, in every single transition. You're like, I can't let this script down because it's a really important script. So there's that side of like, how do you make sure that like my interpretation of it is true enough to Sanaz's intention and also slightly different and unique, because we're staging it in the round. And in the White Theater, you know, there's in the script, there's a whiteboard that is prominently featured. And you can't do that in the round. So immediately I knew that this was going to be the first production to like deal with the fact that we're not writing anything up. Like, there's no lessons on the whiteboard. So that for me was one of the first things that I was terrified of, because I was like, I have to do this. I have to do this way. Like, can you just let me do the play as written? Like, this is like I was so excited. But of course, that's like those moments of fear as an artist are like, okay, well, I'm clearly scared because I love the thing so much. So let me sit down and think about how I solve this problem. And I talked to my designers, you know, talked to a lot of different directors that have worked in the round. And ultimately we found something that I'm really, really proud of. But there were a ton of challenges when it comes to balancing the realism of the piece with the meta theatricality of doing it in the round. I do think this is a piece that was written for a proscenium, but I'm so proud of where we landed because it gave me the opportunity to kind of maybe lean in a little bit to the Pigpen side of my brain that I might not have if I was doing a very traditional setup of this show. I think there are moments that kind of blur reality and surrealism. Not many. It's a very real show. But I think for those of you that, are you all seeing it tonight or no?
Who's seeing it tonight?
No. Okay, so this is
That's
just
not a small chunk.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Has anyone already seen it? Ooh.
Oh, great. We got two. So the ending, right, is like this kind of, I think I've leaned into how surreal we can be in that moment. I think I'm proud of that.
Would you talk about there's a theatrical gesture that the play is making in the way that it deals with learning English and having characters who are speaking multiple languages during the play. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So Sanaz's theatrical device that's kind of at the heart of this show is that you come to the show and they're speaking English the whole time. They're speaking so you can understand them. But when they're speaking in this kind of standard American dialect that I'm using right now, that's their Farsi. Because in your native tongue, you have no accent. And then when they switch to try to speak to English, then they put on the accent and they sound a little bit like this, and and it's a really fascinating device because your ear gets trained very quickly. I compare it to watching a Shakespeare show. Like I've read all the Shakespeare's, I've seen many, but still, when I go to a Shakespeare show, it takes like 10 minutes for me to be like, what are they saying? And it's kind of that, Sanaz has done this really beautiful thing where she's created an oral trick to make you think you're hearing two languages when you're only hearing one. So that's a really beautiful.
And but there are moments of Farsi in the show, yes? Actual Farsi, or yes or no?
Who knows?
Okay, perhaps not. You will have to come and see the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything else in terms of big ideas that the show is dealing with that was really exciting for you as a writer or an artist to grapple with and to dig into?
Yeah, I mean, I always talk about how this, it's a great moment for Iranian Americans, but it's kind of a cheat code of a script, because what she's really doing is she's just telling the story of immigrants who have to learn English. The fact that it's Iran is a very lovely, lovely thing for those of us who are Iranian. But I really do think of this as like the immigration story told through the lens of 5 Iranian characters, because so many people globally have to take the TOEFL, which is the test that they're all taking for, right? Like this is the test that you have to pass for your immigration status, for your college acceptance. Like this is one of the official 2 tests globally that you have to, as a foreign English learner, you have to pass to come to this country, or to come to Australia, or to go to Britain. So like it's a global test. So I just think like, oh, what an interesting thing, right? We get to talk about this experience of why people choose to leave their homes through the lens of this script. And I think that, to me, on some days was even more interesting than the Iranian stuff, right? Because like that's a much bigger conversation. Everyone can relate to that in some way. And I do think that's why it won the Pulitzer, right? Like I believe in like trying to write for the broadest possible audience, but using the most specific material you can, right? That's kind of my compass when I'm making things, is like, I do want this to be popular. I do want this to be successful. I don't want to write this for my 4 friends, but I also want to write really, really, really specifically and meticulously, because that's where the truth is.
I mean, that's the old adage, which I think is absolutely true. The more specific you can write, the more specific these people's experience is, the more universal it becomes, the more we connect to it as people.
Yeah. And that goes back to what I was saying, is like, I'm just like stunned that like the Iranian lens and the Iranian specificity is finally being used. Because like I've had catharsis in theaters, but I've just never had it regarding Iranian characters. So yeah, the first audience we had, I was just like, I was gone. I was wrecked. I was crying so hard. My wife was here and she just held me, and I was like, "Are we in public?" She's like, "Yeah, it's okay, get it out." she's like, "Get it out, get it out." So it's really sweet.
Is it a similar experience? Do you find for your cast for this to be a unique opportunity for them to tell a story from their own cultural perspective?
Yeah, I mean, talk about like a tremendous responsibility of like directing the thing. Like every Iranian actor in the country wants to be in this show right now. Like it is crazy. Like every single one of them. So having to choose was insane, because I'm just like, uh-oh, this is really special. That's the first time I realized how special it was, because like apparently I was not the only one who cried when it won the Pulitzer. Like that's really the feeling of like, oh, this means everything to a lot of you. And so for me, the one thing I'll say is I really wanted, authentic casting, just because like that's great. I believe in that. But I also don't believe in like purity tests, like in terms of like you must be this or no entrance. So I did think that, you know, my approach to art making is like we're gonna use specificity, we're gonna use authenticity, but it wasn't like, you know, Joe, who plays Omid, is not Iranian in the cast, but he's half Lebanese and half Italian. So he has the immigration story in his history. And that's like, you know, I'm sure there's some directors that wouldn't have done that. Like, I think it's a really big moment for Iranian Americans, but it, to me, I am dubious of anyone that tells me there's a rule when you're making art. And so I had to pursue what felt most honest to me, which was like, no, this is okay. We're actors. Like, we can do this and still do it responsibly. You know, I'm an Iranian director, which is great. I think I'm the second Iranian director to do this show. So the original director of English wasn't Iranian. So I'm like, oh, it's not a 1-for-1 for me. It doesn't. It's the whole team doesn't have to be Iranians, because then there is no diversity. Yet again, it's just monotony. Once again, it's just Iranian monotony, which I have enough of in my family. So I'm looking forward to those few members that aren't.
You had a chance to talk to Sanaz about the show, yes? I'm
Yeah.
wondering if there's anything that she said to you or anything from that conversation that has really stuck with you through this process or changed the way you thought about the show or guided your thinking while you were working through the process.
That's a good question. You know, I was really practical when I spoke to Sanaz, because I know what's being asked of her right now. Like, she is the first. She's the first Iranian to win the Pulitzer. And her life is insane. So, yes, I did the, like, you wrote a really, really good play. Thank you so much. I love you. And then I turned that off. And I was like, so let's talk about this whiteboard. Like, that's actually what I used the call for. Because I was like, I don't want to bother her. I don't want to bug her. But I did have an idea of how I wanted to eliminate the whiteboard from the production. I wanted to run that by her. And by doing so, you know, it was just a great conversation. Because I'm a playwright. So it was just like a great conversation. We're like, oh, you're just a writer. You just like, it really is. I had the same feeling when I met Lin-Manuel. I was like, oh, you're just a person. Like, I think these people get really glorified. You know, and you're like, oh, yeah, you just wrote a really good thing. And you did it with the support of a lot of people, right? Like, these things are drafted. Like, the early drafts of English are not the ones that you're going to see. So it was fascinating to talk to her about that. And I enjoyed it, and there was like an immediate connection. Like, you can't deny that, right? Like, that's the cool part. That's the thing that has not happened in my professional career, where you're like, oh, whoa, your mom sounds like my mom. That's crazy. Like, that is just a crazy thing. So we talked a little bit about that. But no, I think with the playwriting, I just wanted to respect her enough to not like open up every conversation she's had with 35 dramaturgs. You know, I'm like, I know you've done all this work. Let's talk about this whiteboard, and then I'll let you go. And she's lovely. Yeah.
Is any of your family going to have the chance to come and see the show? They're not very far, right?
Yeah, no. So my family's all in Arizona. My mom and both of her sisters came to first preview.
Oh, no.
Yeah, very, very
Did they
eager.
think that was opening? That's not
They
right.
absolutely did. I've been doing this so long, and they still don't get it. They, like, at this point, it's on you, you know? Like, I've warned you for 17 years to read the text. And the text says previews and opening. No, so, and then my dad and my brother and some of my other family are coming on opening.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
How does it feel to have them see this show that you directed?
I mean, really cool. Really cool. I'm still processing that, right? We're still in previews. So, a part of my, I don't know, I think I think my parents are just tired of all the things that I'm doing this year. Like, it's a crazy year, and I think this one was the one that I wanted them to come to. And I was like, this is you. Like, this is, and my dad, holy moly. Okay, so Iranian parents. You know, me and my dad, I try to go deep with my dad. I try to like sit down and be like, let's tell me stories. And he's like, yeah, sure, okay, whatever. But he's not like me. He's not like a poet. He's a businessman. So the way he tells me, I posted a picture the other day from rehearsal on my like Facebook, and he responds to the picture, and it was a picture of like the TOEFL textbook, which is what the test they're taking, and he just responds to that photo. Oh yeah, I took the TOEFL in 1978. I had to score a 50 to get out of the country, but I didn't. I scored a 49, and I had to be in the Iranian military for 3 years.
And this was the first you had heard of this?
And I'm just like, hi, who are you? Like, what the hell? Like, can we talk about that sometime?
Thanks for the research.
Yeah,
help,
wait, I would have loved that story 3 months ago when I started directing this play. So there's a little bit of it's not that he's, I just think it's fascinating because these are the moments that you just don't get in The Old Man and the Old Moon. For me personally, The Old Man and the Old Moon is such a beautiful exploration of theatricality, but this is a beautiful exploration of what my family had to go through. And I'm just so grateful that I get to do both. I'm grateful.
I'd love to hear questions from you guys. I'll repeat them for the microphone since we don't have another. Yes.
So there was 4 years?
So the question is about Like Water for Elephants and the length of the collaboration, because it was mentioned when you guys were here for Tale of Despero.
Yeah, musicals take a long time.
A very long time.
We started writing Water for Elephants in 2016. So yeah, I'm ready. It's a beautiful, beautiful show, but it is the biggest thing I've ever been associated with, just on a scale point of view. There's massive puppets, there's dance, there's singing, and then there's also a live circus happening on stage. So we started writing that show in 2016 with Rick Ellis, who wrote Jersey Boys and Peter and the Starcatcher and Cher, and he's a wonderful, wonderful man. And yeah, I honestly, a part of my brain was well, I don't know how this part of the business works. Let's just keep writing these songs. And now I'm learning how it works. And it's really fascinating. Yeah, it was a good collaboration where we feel very grateful. We learned a lot. I think only time will tell if we did a good job or not. I think when something takes that long, I actually wrote this for Pigpen's social media about 2 months ago when we were about to go into Broadway rehearsals. Oh, yeah, which, by the way, they're all in Broadway rehearsals right now. So I'm here doing the show, and then I'm going to go join them as soon as we're done. And I was kind of sitting there thinking about, man, I wrote those lyrics that are going to be sung on a Broadway stage 8 years ago. I was a different person. That's just a weird. I wish it didn't take that long. Granted, we had a pandemic, so we have to acknowledge that. There was a 2-year gap where the whole industry shut down. So I think Elephants has been, we've been together for 17 years, and we've been working on it for 8 of those years. It doesn't make any sense, but hopefully, I really am in a very. I think artists all get this way. Right before the thing is done, we have no idea what we did. And I'm oh, okay, now it's your turn to tell me. So when you see it, let us know. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, here.
So you met your 6 friends in college. What college was that?
The question was, what college
Yeah, we went
did
to
Pigpen meet at?
We went to Carnegie Mellon. I went to Carnegie Mellon for acting. Yeah.
Other questions? Yes, please. So the question is, how big a switch is it to move from Pigpen to English?
A big one.
On a scale of 1 to 10.
There's no shadow puppets in this show. Yeah. No, it was a big decision. I was really grateful. I was so grateful when Barry asked me to direct it because I didn't think anyone would see me as that kind of artist. I was actually getting worried that, with Pigpen, sometimes our aesthetic leads the conversation because it's such a recognizable aesthetic. And, when you're in a group of 7 guys, I did tend to kind of lean onto the directing side. I did tend to lead on the producing side. And Water for Elephants is a songwriting project. So I just felt like I wasn't really getting what I wanted out of that show, even though it's a beautiful thing that I'm proud of. This was the most serendipitous job I've ever been offered because I was like, there it is. That's what I want to do. And then I was like, oh my God, can I do it? That was the big question. It's wait, am I even able to do it? So yeah, I've been going back to the version of me that was into theater before Pigpen to direct this. There was a guy who did a ton of Shakespeare, did a ton of classical work, was just obsessed with language, and then Pigpen came along, and I became a folk puppeteer. And I'm oh no, the other guy is still very much a part of me. So it's been lovely. I hope I did a good job. You'll have to tell me.
Do you envision more directing in your future?
Yeah, I would love that. I mean, this has been one of the best projects I've ever had. But also, you know, I can't imagine. So the biggest thing that came with me from Pigpen, this is a good story, is every single time we're in that theater, I'll just stop and be like, what did everyone think of that? And people are like, does he really want to know? Like, and I'm like, yeah, like, how do you think I make theater? I need everyone's opinion immediately. And because that's what we do to each other, the 7 of us, right? And we've grown accustomed to that kind of routine, which is like, okay, obviously not everyone's going to get what they want. There's 7 of us, but like, let's all talk about it. And I think that the main feedback that I've gotten from my actors and my designers is that like that's rare. Like I really want to hear what they all think of every part of the show. And that's just because that's what I've been doing for 10 years. So I don't know how to do it any other way. And then I get to like chew on that, and it almost feels weird to be the guy that goes home and is like, well, now I get to decide. But I'm ready. I'm ready to make those decisions. Like I'm ready for it.
And you have the experience
Totally.
in doing that process that
Yeah.
it's not overwhelming, which is unique.
Yeah.
Yes, please. So just for the mic, the question is about, are the other 6 members of Pigpen also doing their own projects, and how do you guys envision yourselves as both independent and coming together again to make more work as a community, or do you imagine that?
Yeah, I mean, their projects are having kids. I'm writing
It's
poems.
a large project.
That's a big project. They've bit off a big project. No, we're older, so I think there are other artistic efforts for sure. Ryan put out a solo album that's beautiful that I listen to all the time. Ben and Matt started a little side project on a band. You know, I would be lying if I didn't say I am not naive to this cultural moment. Like, I'm getting the most work, and there's a reason for that. And I'm just struggling with how I deal with that because those are my brothers. But also, they're going to Broadway. They're going to be fine. like we're going to... No, I'm being honest with you. Like, I'm trying to be... Like, it's a really difficult thing to navigate because we've all had moments of stepping outside of the company for our many-year history. Like, that's a normal part of this relationship. But we have never had this long apart. I don't live in New York anymore. I live in L.A. Alex is a father. You know, almost all of us are now married, so we all have wives. And it's a very different tenor to our collaboration because we all have other priorities, but we know how to do it. That's the coolest thing. When we were 22, we had no idea what we were doing. You know, we were just like, well, I hope this works. And now we're like, okay, it works. When do we do it? When do we find time? Everyone, find 3 weeks in the summer. We need to go write something. Or okay, when do we have time to play 4 shows next year? Or the craziest thing that's happening right now, which everyone's going to ask us in about 10 minutes, is what's next? And holy moly, that's a hard decision. Because when you all have kids and when you have families and we know how long these things take, that question is like, hey, what are the 7 of you guys going to do for the next 8 years? And I don't know if we're ready to answer that. I know we're going to make some more music soon. And I know there's a couple of stories that we're interested in writing for the stage. But I don't think we're going to dive into anything anytime soon because we need to figure ourselves out. Yeah.
Well, that collaborative time is precious in a new way.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, I feel like everyone goes through this in a certain way in their careers, right? Like you have kids, you have to learn the new like focus zone, and the way that you are how I am most useful to that company is something that we're all figuring out. Because when we were all together, it was just easy. It's just easy. So now it's like, how do we recreate that?
Great. We have time for maybe one more question. Yes, please.
I read that you recommended that after seeing the show, we should go eat Persian food.
Oh, the question is about recommendations for Persian food.
Absolutely, yeah.
Have you been out and about?
I have.
In San Diego to make recommendations?
I have. There's a place called Bandar that's pretty good. Oh, there you go. See?
People have eaten there.
Hometown crowd right there, yeah. Bandar's pretty good. There's a really great Afghan spot, Afghan Persian fusion that I'm forgetting the name. Something Khazmir Pass, maybe?
It's not far from here. This is why they've all been there before.
Please don't cancel me. Please don't cancel me. I absolutely. Those 2 spots have been my favorite. I've had other ones, but I think those are my favorite. And for me, gourmet sabzi is my favorite meal Persian culture. It's like a stew with lots and lots and lots of greens and herbs that have been simmered all day with kidney beans over rice. It's really, really delicious. Yeah.
Is there want to have a request for one more question? Yes, please, quickly.
I come from an immigrant. How does your personality?
I love this question. The question is that her father used to say you have as many personalities as the languages you speak. And so how is your personality, Arya, different in Farsi than it is in English?
I mean, slightly easier question for me because I'm not fluent in the way I am. So my personality is that of a child that like just wants to be liked. But I will say a story that's fascinating is that today I was in rehearsal for the show because we're still rehearsing in previews, and there's an actor in the show named Mary Alpeak who plays the grandma. She's older actress who was very, very prominent in Iran before the revolution. She was a film star, and now she is in the show. And my parents freaked out when like they were like, "You're directing Mary Alpeak? Like our son has made it!" like it's like it was that level of news. And today I'm talking to her, and she was like, "Arya, I want you to do an interview with me." I was like, "Great, Mary, I'll do an interview with any time." She's like, "In Farsi," and I was like, "Nope." And she's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Mary, I can't." And I'm by the way, I'm saying all this in Farsi. I was like, "Mary, I can't speak Farsi," and she's like, "Yes, you can. Are you crazy?" And so I think I have a lot of self-confidence issues. Like I am funny. I'm still funny, but I don't think I'm as eloquent. I'm not as able to really spell things out in Farsi. I think I rely a lot more on my charm.
Being funny that's an achievement, though. To be funny in another language,
it's just because I know the bad words. Come on, like
Would
you drop one or two of those when people aren't expecting it. And
as we close, is it too much to ask if you would give us the gift of hearing some Farsi before we go?
Yeah, I mean, سلام اسم من آریا هست. خیلی خوش اومدم که اومدین. مرسی برای yeah, that's kind of it right now. It's hard because it is funny because like I do a lot better in conversation. You know, it's like, and that's a great example of like it is a familial thing for me speaking Farsi. When I'm around my grandparents, my vocabulary explodes. It's really interesting. But like right now, I literally just said, "Hi, my name is Arya. Thanks for coming. Also, thanks for coming." And but I can speak it. I'm working on it. I'm also just like digesting it as an artist. Right? That's what my whole book was about. Was that moment right now. I wrote an entire novel about that because it's like, "Oh, why does it feel that way?" So yeah.
Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank everyone for coming. A special thank you to Vicki and Carl Zeiger for sponsoring these Insight seminars. And thank you all. Thank you very much, Arya.
Enjoy the show.